The Honourable Member for Elgin St. Thomas, London South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So, my question that I asked the Public Safety Minister in a question period recently stemmed from a rather bizarre exchange I had with him during a Committee of the Whole, in which the minister responsible for overseeing Canada's gun laws admitted he didn't know what a firearms license was. He admitted he didn't know about the Canadian Firearms Safety Course that all Canadian firearms owners must pass to get their firearms license. Now, I suspect if I had had a bit more time, I might have learned that the minister didn't even know what a firearm was, but unfortunately we'll have to save that for next Committee of the Whole. But why this is important, Mr. Speaker, is because the Liberal government's firearms confiscation regime is predicated on misinformation. It's actually predicated on the idea that law-abiding firearms owners are the source of gun crime in Canada. So I wasn't actually surprised that the minister responsible for this scheme didn't know anything about guns and gun owners, because if he did know, the Liberals' plans wouldn't exist. They wouldn't make any sense, and they'd be aware of that. We know that the vast majority of firearms crime in Canada is the responsibility of guns that have been illegally smuggled across the Canada-US border. It is guns that are very connected to organized crime and gangs. It is not Grandpa Joe's hunting rifle. It's not the firearm that a law-abiding licensed firearms owner like myself and like many of my colleagues in this House are. So what I asked the minister in question period was whether he would commit to actually learning about his file, and because he clearly didn't know anything about it, whether he would commit to scrapping the Liberal government's firearms confiscation regime. Now, the minister has had a couple of weeks to bone up on this. Maybe he has, maybe he hasn't. But what I can tell you is that Canadian gun owners have been attacked by this government, which does not know that they are statistically less likely to commit a crime, less likely to have any connection to gun violence or gun crime by virtue of having gone through the rigorous vetting and training and examination that the Canadian firearms program requires of gun owners. And the firearms that were banned by Order in Council 5 years ago are firearms that have been, and they've added to this list continually, used by hunters, sport shooters, and collectors without any issue, without any connection to gun crime whatsoever. Now, I represent a riding that has a lot of rural communities where, unlike for perhaps the Laurentian elites across the aisle, firearms are a way of life. Firearms are a way of life for people in Aylmer, people in St. Thomas, people in Central Elgin, some Londoners as well, because they understand that this is a hobby and a pastime that has deep roots in Canada. So when the Liberal government passes its measures on this based on misinformation, they should take the opportunity to be educated and to learn about this. So only when the Liberal government and the minister responsible for the firearms program learn about guns will they apparently realize that their regime is based on complete and utter falsehoods. So I'm here to ask once and for all whether the Minister of Public Safety will commit to scrapping the confiscation scheme, which only, not majorly, not generally, which only targets law-abiding gun owners.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, in response to the Honourable Member for Elgin St. Thomas, London South, I'm pleased to speak about our government's commitments to strengthen gun control and to fight gun violence in Canada. The safety and security of Canadians is one of the government's top priorities, and we're taking firm action to prevent an increase in gun violence in communities across Canada. In 2020, following the deadliest mass shooting in Canadian history, in which 22 people were killed in Nova Scotia, the government determined that the significant risk posed by certain firearms outweighs any justification for their continued availability in Canada. The government banned more than 2,000 makes and models of firearms. Let's be clear, Mr. Speaker, these are firearms that are not appropriate for hunting or for sport shooting and which exceed the limits of safe civilian use. Since then, additional assault-style firearms have been banned in December 24 and March 2025, bringing the total number of prohibited firearms to about 2,500. The program to provide compensation has been in place for several years, and as of April 30th, 2025, over 12,000 requests have been submitted for compensation, and as of June 16th, more than 10,600 of these firearms have been destroyed. The government will soon implement the second phase of the program, which will focus on fair compensation for individual firearm owners. Work is progressing well to make this program available soon. No single program or initiative can address the issue of gun violence. And beyond buying back guns, the government's comprehensive plan to protect Canadians from gun crime includes other measures, including strengthening our borders, where we are committed to adding resources to fight gun trafficking and smuggling to prevent guns from entering Canada. Since 2017, Mr. Speaker, the government has invested over $1.3 billion in safety initiatives, including the Action on Gun and Gang Violence Initiative, the Building Safe Communities Fund, and investments to equip the RCMP and the Canada Border Services Agency with state-of-the-art tools such as X-ray machines to detect smuggled firearms and smuggled firearm components. In addition, in the last speech from the throne, the government announced the deployment of detectors of illicit merchandise and the use of drones and helicopters, as well as additional personnel and the use of canine units at the border. These measures will greatly increase the ability of law enforcement to detect and seize firearms and prohibited weapons at the border. Criminal penalties for trafficking and smuggling firearms were recently increased from 10 to 14 years in prison. This change will, on the one hand, strengthen deterrence and, on the other hand, support the prosecution of offenders involved in firearms smuggling. Together, these efforts will prevent firearms from being diverted to the black market, where they could be obtained to commit crimes or inflict mass casualties in mass shootings. Through these initiatives, Mr. Speaker, the government is taking concrete steps and acting in a responsible way to make Canada less vulnerable to gun violence while being
Thomas London South.
Mr. Speaker, the parliamentary secretary had the audacity to mention the Portapique shooting to justify this Liberal government's attack on gun owners. The brutal murderer in that case used illegally acquired guns and himself did not legally own them. So it is disgraceful that this government would... I can't even use the word in this House, that this government would take advantage of those victims to score political points off the backs of law-abiding gun owners. He should be ashamed, and I hope he apologizes for that. Will this government, which clearly the minister and the parliamentary secretary don't know anything about the gun file, abandon this half-baked confiscation scheme that only targets law-abiding owners, not killers, not gang murderers, and not those who are actually responsible for breaking the law?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, quite the contrary. I reiterate our government's commitment to public safety through stronger gun control. We have we've banned more than 2,500 assault-style firearms deemed inappropriate for civilian use. Whether it be for hunting or sport shooting, 12,000 of these firearms have been removed from businesses, and the second phase for individuals will be launched later in 2025. It will allow responsible gun owners to be properly compensated. The government has invested $1.3 billion in initiatives to make communities more safe. Too many lives have been lost to gun violence. We will continue to take strong action to strengthen controls, curb the flow of smuggled guns across the border, and provide harsher penalties for gun smuggling. We remain committed to keeping Canadians safe, and we will always be there for them.